Jay Skurski, cold open. How's it going, my man?
It's going well. Just kind of re-emerging back into the world after the draft and draft weekend, and but yeah, doing well. This is a fun time of year, and then we got kind of the finish line in sight where there's like that little break where we can be human beings, between mini camp and training camp. That's on the horizon. So
Speak for yourself, man. We've got a third
yeah,
baby due in June, and we're building a house, and they'll be done around the same time. It's funny.
yeah,
You're right. Like usually that little buffer there before training camp is a nice little respite to catch up on life, vacation, relax.
yeah. Not for you. No.
Nah, yeah, it's a good little you know, on ramp into
Yeah.
the madness of everything, I suppose. But it was nice. The draft ended to catch up on life. I mowed the lawn for the first time. Nothing beats that first mow.
Yeah.
You throw on a podcast, some music, maybe drink a cold beverage. But then I had to go to the DMV because this new like New York State license thing. I guess we have to
Oh
update
yeah.
our licenses to travel. I literally walked into that place, in West Seneca, looked around for 1.7 seconds and got the hell out. Like I want nothing to do. I mean, if you just want a great day to be spoiled, just walk into the DMV. For whatever reason, New York State can't figure out a lot of stuff because you drive down Boston State Road, it feels like, ATV off-road fury. I mean, it's insane. Have you been down Boston State Road lately, Jay? It's a
No, I have
horror
not.
show.
Is it? Yeah, no. And I have not been in the DMV. I'm just going to use my passport to travel right now because that is not the idea of even trying to navigate that isn't any fun. And what are you going to do? You're just not going to go anywhere. You're just not going to take a flight.
Well, I do have a passport, so I guess I
Oh,
can
so
just
you're
use
good.
that.
Yeah, you can
Yeah, I'm
just use
good.
that. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, but that's a little time you never get back. It just stinks, and there's
Yeah,
a million people, and everybody's just miserable. And then
yeah,
then you go down Boston State Road. I took a shot at like Erie County, I think, on socials, and it's really the state though. People are like whatever, whoever's in charge. It's insane. Like people are weaving into the other lane and the shoulder just so they don't ruin their vehicle. Kathy
yeah.
was here with the stadium, bragging about this. How about you make your way over to Boston Colden and fix the road? I'm gonna rant like the general manager now. Don't get me going.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we didn't even have to tee you up. You just went right for it. You just
I
went
mean, it's not even
right
really
into it.
political. I don't care what party is in charge. Like it is. I mean, if you can't take care of your own roads, you
Yeah,
have a problem. I mean, there's just shit everywhere, litter everywhere in some of these cities. Like I don't. All right.
yeah, yeah.
Let's
No, we're
stop.
good.
We've moved on from the shopping carts. I got to pick some new bags because I feel like we've kind of addressed that. People are returning their carts to the corral in higher numbers. We've got other issues though on our hands.
I've been meaning to ask you, did you know that there's like a whole like social media account of some guy who just like basically like bullies people into returning their carts? He puts like magnetic bumper stickers on their car if they don't return. Have you seen this?
I have cart narcs, right? Is it that account? Yeah.
Yes. And that part of me was wondering if it was you. And then the other part is I hope Tyler has seen this because like this guy, like they're soulmates. Like you and this guy must be soulmates. I'm glad that you've seen it though, because if it wasn't on your radar, it was gonna blow your mind. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't met him, I should say, but
Okay.
I'm aware of the account. It's
But do
magnificent.
we want to clear it up that it isn't you though? It's not you.
It's not me. No, it's not
Okay.
me.
All right.
But they're
Okay.
hired. I
Good.
mean, if they want go along to fund them in any possible way, I mean, this is
Yeah.
an effort to get behind for sure. But yeah, let's look back at these 72 hours for the Buffalo Bills. A lot of defense.
Yeah.
Defense, 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 defense. The first five picks, uh, I've got many thoughts. I'm sure you've got many thoughts, but initial reaction as these are flying off the board one after the other.
None, no surprise, like not at all. I anticipated it. I predicted it. I mean, I don't think you needed a, magic eight ball to make that prediction. It was pretty clear that's, the area of the ball that they wanted to focus on. A lot of different reasons for that. Brandon Beane saying it was a better defensive, class group of prospects than offensive. That may be true. We'll see. Um, obviously the need on the team, number two cornerback, defensive line with guys suspended, all there, all true. Um, the if we want to look a little bit more big picture in recent years, the reason that this team, by and large, has failed in the postseason the way that it has been the defense. So this is as close to a total retooling or rebuilding as you can get for a team that was one of the final four playing last year for one side of the ball, right? I mean, they have made significant changes to both levels of their defense, front and back. Linebackers excluded, Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard are sort of the constants, but every other position group, meaning the secondary and the defensive line, has really been rebuilt. I think I know the point you're going to make because I've read your column and we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, and it's one that I agree with. But yeah, the initial reaction to the draft, the first five picks and six out of the first seven being defense, is one of not great surprise. I anticipated this. I thought this was the way he was going to go, and he did. And now it's a matter of, okay, let's see the improvements, right?
Totally. Because it's not like this is new. They've done this. Brandon Beane at his pre-draft press conference, I think he made this point again. He said, look, me and Sean McDermott both believe it starts up front, build the defensive line, get the quarterback, get the defensive line. I feel like we hear that even more than everybody eats. That is a rallying cry for the franchise. And like their actions back it up. They have been pouring resources into the defensive line, really even back to old pod co-host Jim Monis's days. I think he was actually around for the Star Latulele, him and Doug Whaley.
Yeah.
And then it was after the draft that they got let go. But I mean, you just look at these numbers. If you give me a second here. So, I mean, Star Latulele, that's about 32 million that they spent on him in earnings for that player. Trent Murphy was 23.5 million. Mario Addison was close to 20 mil. Von Miller made 47.3 million in career earnings for 14 sacks. They've drafted 8 defensive linemen in the top 100, from Harrison Phillips, 96th overall, Ed Oliver 9th, H.A. Epinesa 54th, Greg Rousseau 30th, Boogie Basham 61st, Dwayne Carter 95th, and then this draft with TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson at 41 and 72 respectively. Of course, they did take another just outside of the top 100 too. So I think you emphasize it as you should. It's very important. But what gives you the confidence that this group, this class of free agents, Joey Bosa, Larry Ogunjobi, Michael Hoyt, and all these draft picks, what gives you the confidence it's going to be any different? That this is the crew that's going to turn it around? We're not going to know the answer to that till January. But to me, the takeaway from this draft is all the pressures on the defense, all the pressures on Sean McDermott and his defensive staff, which also is kind of reconfigured. When they get to that inevitable moment against Patrick Mahomes, you better be seeing TJ Sanders licking his chops on that one-on-one matchup that he was kind of getting into with us there in the auditorium, because Ed Oliver's eating up a double team. He better win that. He better get in Mahomes' face, and you better have Maxwell on the crosser covering Xavier Worthy one-on-one to make a play. You know what I mean? The action's there. I mean, if I'm Brandon Beane, it's like, you got all the resources. Right. Here you go. Let's see something different.
Yeah, I mean, it's an area that they haven't been able to figure out. They haven't gotten it right, right? And to your point, I mean, just because you miss on, Boogie Basham doesn't mean you stop drafting it, right? For the same reason that you see him take Max Hairston in the first round after missing on Kaiir Elam, right? You make a mistake, that doesn't mean you immediately say, all right, well, we got to shift gears and totally abandon the plan there. But to your point, it's an area that really throughout Brandon Beane's tenure, they have not been able to figure out. They've gotten good play at times from Greg Rousseau and from Von Miller before he got hurt, and from, Ed Oliver has done some good things as the 9th overall pick. You would expect him to do some good things to the point where he gets paid. And was he what they needed him to be last year? Definitely not. Not throughout the season, not consistently enough. Feel like that's the word we've used about Ed Oliver's career, is consistency. It's lacked, right? He's been dominant at times, but it hasn't been enough. And this is a point that I made the day after the Super Bowl that I brought up at the combine to Brandon Beane and to Sean McDermott. The Kansas City Chiefs have lost twice in the last 5 years in the playoffs, once to Tampa and once to Philadelphia in Super Bowls. And the key to both of those games was the opposing defensive line winning the game, winning the matchup. The Bucks did it and the Eagles did it. And the Bills are chasing that. They're chasing a way to beat Patrick Mahomes. The way they've tried to do it hasn't worked, right? And so now they're trying this new plan. You know, I'm sure we're going to get into it, right? It's not the only way that you can win games is to have a defense, right? You could just simply outscore teams. But they went, the opposite, and they said, all right, well, we think our offense is doing enough. That is the point that Brandon Beane has made. He made it to me after the draft when I asked him, and he made it in a much more colorful way, I guess we could say, during an appearance on a local radio station here on Monday morning. We'll see if he's right, right? I guess is the best way to describe that. But there is no question that, beginning in free agency and including through the draft, the focus has been on rebuilding the defense. And I know this sounds maybe a little bit stronger than what I mean it to sound, but largely ignoring the offense. That has kind of been what they've done.
I don't even really think you're exaggerating that much at all. I mean, you're the wide receiver who, first of all, the wide receiver you traded a third round pick for, Amari Cooper, didn't work out. He's still on the street. And then the wide receiver who led you in snaps and then led you in receiving yards in the AFC Championship game, Mac Hollins, you let him walk to the New England Patriots. So something isn't perfect here, to put it mildly. And
you've got two out and you got one in, right? Joshua
yeah,
Palmer, who has done okay. He's done a few nice things in his career, and I understand the skill set and why it might be a fit. But to say that Joshua Palmer is coming in and as some finished product and you already know what you're going to get from him is wildly optimistic. I mean, he is here to be a piece of the puzzle is really what you hope that he is. And to think that he's anything more than that, or that he's a guy that opposing defensive coordinators are going, holy cow, how do we stop Joshua Palmer? I mean, he's not that, right? And to your point about Mac Hollins, like the guy was signed to be, I think most people thought he was going to be a special teams player, right? He turns out to be a darn near invaluable piece to that group in terms
no
of
doubt.
the leadership. We heard it in the spring. That's unheard of for a guy on a 1 year, close to veteran minimum contract to hear all of these teammates, Josh Allen of all people, talking about what a leader he was. He was their best receiver by the end of the season. In that game against the Chiefs, he was the only one that was making a darn play, right? And so, he's gone. Cooper is not what, they thought they were getting, and the market is speaking loudly there in terms of, where he's at in his career. But he played a decent amount of snaps for him, right? And you haven't replaced those in any other meaningful way either. And so I think both things can be true. And I tweeted a link to my column that I wrote the night of the draft, the night that the draft concluded. Both things can be true. Rebuilding the defense is logical. It is the unit that has failed this team more often than not in the playoffs. However, questioning whether Josh Allen needed another receiver at some point,
Yeah.
whether it be in this draft or, just whenever, is also fair. I don't think that is overlooking, the offense has been good, but you want to keep it good and you want to make it even better if you can, right?
Yeah.
And so I think both of those things can be true.
Right, because it's cliche, but defenses will adjust, right? And GMs and coaches, they're the ones who tell us every year that no two teams are the same. So part of me does get Brandon Beane's exasperation when all of us are bringing up the offense. Like they did run for 30 touchdowns. They did throw for 30 touchdowns. They did score 30 points, 8 straight games. He mentioned that to Jeremy and Joe this morning on GR, which, the whole conversation is worth listening to. It did become a little more nuanced if people look beyond the 2-minute intro, which was on fire. I mean, Brandon was ready to roll, obviously. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, you don't just quit on defense, but you can, like, they did a lot in March, and you can draft a lot. They had a decent amount of draft capital, and you can at least throw a dart in the top 100. I mean, this is a regime that has drafted one wide receiver in the top 100 in 8 drafts with Josh Allen. And there's many different ways to find these players. I get it. And you throw to running backs, you throw to tight ends. All of that's true. But at least throw a dart. Like
Yeah.
there's got to be somebody that you're kind of interested at some point, and that one receiver, Keon Coleman, you traded down. So it's not like you're aggressively going after this player. So
I mean,
right, if they
right.
do it all over again, Brandon Beane might be looking like a genius. If this defense turns around, and like I said, you get Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson in that playoff game, and you're just Philadelphia Eagles, Vic Fangio style, coming after them in waves with
Yeah.
these D linemen, and you're still able to run the ball, and you're still able to figure out stuff on offense. It can all work out. I mean, I think they exceeded mine, yours, everybody's expectations offensively last year. MVP quarterback,
Yeah.
but it's okay to innovate and evolve. And I keep coming back to this conversation with Peyton Manning for blood and guts, talking about Dallas Clark, and he pointed to Dallas like they had this great offense that was putting up numbers, winning a lot of games. But he said when Dallas Clark supplanted, I think it was Brandon Stokely in the slot, that's when defenses were like, oh shit, because he could drill your corner in the run game. If they had that matchup, they're just going to run at him. Or if it's a corner, he's going to beat your corner. I'm not saying it has to be a tight end. I'm just saying really, 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 really good offenses can still find a way to evolve over time, and add in another weapon might be a way to evolve. It doesn't have to be in the first round either, which I thought would have been great. Could be in the second round, third round, fourth round.
Yeah. I don't think right. I mean, I think when you listen to Brandon Beane and that segment, right? I don't know that anyone, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they were banging the drum louder. I'm not sitting here advocating that they should have gone out and paid Devontae Adams in free agency, or they needed Cooper Kupp, or whoever the other, marquee big name wide receivers that were on the market in March were, that they needed to be in on all of those guys. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that you're betting on. So what's going to take this offense and at least keep it at the level that it is, or even take it a step further, which is what every offseason the goal should be for every team, right? Is improvement, and that's true for the Bills even on offense. What they're betting on is internal growth, right? And so that's Keon Coleman being healthy and being a lot better in year 2 than he was in year 1. They're betting on Dalton Kincaid being stronger, being healthier with the knee injury that was, hampering him, the second half of the season. They're betting on him in year 3 being the player that they thought they were getting when they traded up for him in the first round. So you're betting big on internal growth from those two, right? And maybe they will be. Maybe they should be better. That's reasonable. I understand that. But the thing about not drafting a receiver until the 7th round is not simply, oh, you have to take a receiver. It's where is your depth, right? Because you talk about planning for injuries, and you've got more defensive linemen right now on this team than can reasonably be kept on a 53-man roster. That problem will ease a little bit with Ogunjobi and Hoyt being suspended for the first 6 weeks. But, you build that depth because, we know guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to go down. Well, at wide receiver right now, you have Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Joshua Palmer as your top 4. Shakir is your sure thing, right? You know what you have there. Samuel was hurt last year. Coleman was hurt last year. Palmer we talked about as being a relative unknown, at least in terms of this offense, this fit with this quarterback, this coaching staff, these teammates. How is he going to fit? Nobody knows the answer to that. Beyond that, those are your top 4. Number 5 is wide open. Tyrell Shavers, Jalen Virgil. I mean, okay, they were here last year. They got the random practice squad call up. But to say that if one of those guys rolls an ankle and is going to be out for a couple of weeks, that one of those other guys is going to be able to step into a meaningful role on offense for a Super Bowl team, Super Bowl hopeful team, aspirations of being a Super Bowl team, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
As much as I question the decision not to take it, it's not necessarily, oh, you just have to go get a receiver. It's where's your depth at that position, right? Because to me, it's relatively non-existent. You've got 4 that you think are going to be out there, and okay, I get it. If Palmer hits, if Coleman is better, if Samuel is healthy, and they find a way to use him, which it took them a darn long time last year to even do that. And then Shakir, yeah, okay. A lot has to go right there. And if it doesn't, if one or two of those things goes wrong, I consider that to be a little bit of an issue.
Like you said, Keon Coleman got hurt last year. Curtis Samuel started injured. It took him forever to get going. You are one twisted ankle away from looking into that Kmart bin again. And I think it is a premium position. And I think that's the point here too. It's like you do see a lot of smart teams, elite teams like Buffalo valuing the wide receiver position year in and year out through the draft because it's cost controlled. They're homegrown, so you're bringing in this 21-year-old, 22-year-old, and they're understanding your culture, which at One Bills Drive is really really good with an MVP quarterback. It just strikes me as such an opportunity to do maybe not even to this extreme, but Green Bay, since they drafted Jordan Love in 2020, they've been drafting receivers nonstop. Now, there's some Packer fans listening that are probably like, yeah, I wish they drafted defensive player. So I don't know what that balance is.
Yeah.
I feel like if this defense steps up, and like I said, maybe this reconstruction works, and you bring up those examples against Mahomes in the Super Bowl. That's clearly what they're chasing here. But also to bring it back to Green Bay, there's a Ron Wolf, Hall of Fame general manager. One of his one regrets is just not giving Brett Favre more weapons.
Mhm.
Not and you look at his drafts and his regime, really similar to Brandon Beane, like, strikingly similar. They both had a big gamble at quarterback, hit it. They both were really adept at second, third, fourth round, finding Pro Bowlers in that range. They'd make bold trades. Some worked out, some didn't. Veteran free agency, like they were both pretty creative. So I don't know. Look, that's not a couple of media people screaming wide receiver, and I don't think Jeremy and Joe are either. Like I love what Jeremy said. Like the last 2 hours, I wish he would have listened to that. They've been really fair. That's a Hall of Fame general manager saying, I just wish we would have gotten more weapons. So Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott might look back at this and say, maybe you throw a dart or two at some point.
Well, and that gets me back to what I was saying earlier about you basically what you're saying here coming out of this draft is we're counting on, we're relying on, and to take it even a step further, we're dependent on Josh Allen being the MVP again. And that's just a lot to throw on anyone's shoulders. Like, yes, you anticipate Allen being very good because he is very good. But do you have enough offensively that when Josh is not having his best game and is not playing at an MVP level, because it will happen, are you going to be able to win games? And if that happens in the playoffs, are you going to be able to win that game, right? Are you going to be able to continue to put up those points? Let's also not forget here that they had the ball in the AFC title game with an opportunity to win it, and the offense didn't come through, right? So let's not entirely excuse the offense 100%, because Dalton Kincaid, who was drafted in the first round, had an opportunity to catch a pass that he didn't catch. And I know it wasn't an easy play, but I don't really care. That's why he was brought here, was to make those types of plays, right? If every game against the Chiefs comes down to a play or two here or there, eventually the Bills have to be the team that are making those plays, not the Chiefs, right? And so, the thing about the receivers, and it's not just me using this comparison, but you hear a lot about how it's a basketball room, right? So you've got your five, and you've got your point guard, and you've got your shooting guard and your small forward. Yeah, everybody has their different roles. So in the receiver room, it's right, like you've got this big possession receiver in Keon Coleman who can be good in the red zone. You've got this amazing, shifty, contact balanced slot receiver in Khalil Shakir. So you've got those pieces. The thing that is lacking for me is the guy that has the speed to terrorize defenses down the field. I've been saying it since the season ended. They didn't have it last year. They don't have it this year, and I don't understand the reasoning for it. Just get me a guy who defenses have to respect that speed. I don't know why they don't believe that they need that. And it's just a difference of an opinion, really. And to your point, maybe Brandon Beane will be right. But I don't think it's unreasonable at all to look at the way that wide receiver room is currently constructed, the makeup of it, and say that they couldn't use a vertical threat, a guy who could really stretch the field that defenses have to be aware of.
And you know what's really interesting? They had 7 wide receivers in on top 30 visits. So they were interested in the position. Like they were
Yeah.
exhausting their options. They're talking to these guys. And a lot of times when you bring in a prospect on a visit, like you need to learn some more about that player as a human being, as a person. And who was one of those wide receivers? Isaiah Bond, Texas, speed, deep threat. He went undrafted
Hmm.
because he has some unbelievably grisly stuff to his background. Sexual assault allegations. If you look into the description of it, it is ugly. So they did their research on that, and like a lot of other teams, they didn't draft Isaiah Bond. They did their research on a cornerback in Maxwell Harrison, right? He had an allegation against him. And to the Bills' credit, Brandon Bean was ready for that question. I believe it was your colleague, right, Catherine Fitzgerald, to ask the question, and they said they investigated it. And now these things are complicated, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I know exactly what happened. Who knows? But I'm just saying, when it comes to the player that you're describing, that could have been that player, and they didn't like what they saw and heard,
Yeah.
and they talked to him face to face. So, maybe that player in this draft, he said it wasn't that deep of a receiver class, just didn't present themselves at some point before that seventh round. I have a
Well,
hard time thinking there's not somebody who can present that element because that is what they need.
yeah.
Speed.
I mean, I get it. Like, I understand. Everything that he says, Brandon Bean, the points that he make are respected and understood. And like, yes, I get a lot of what you're saying, but they felt the need to force the issue twice at defensive tackle, right? By trading up for T.J. Sanders in the second round, by trading up for Deion Walker in the fourth round. He's saying we can't live without these players. We have to acquire them. So we're going to basically, in essence, move up a little in the second, move down into the third, but then we're going to swap a fourth for a seventh, which is not an insignificant price because we got to get T.J. Sanders, right? And then we're going to do what we need to do to go get Deion Walker. It's hard for me to buy that in all of that 3-day draft process, that marathon draft process, that there wasn't one time where there was a receiver who was within range, and we know how much Brandon Bean likes to move around the board, that he didn't say, okay,
Yeah.
I really don't know if I need this fifth and sixth round pick here. Maybe I can go make a move to get this guy. Are the 9 players that this team drafted this weekend all going to make the 53-man roster? I'd put the odds at that at less than 5%, right? And so maybe you didn't need 9 picks, but the point there is that you saw the urgency along the defensive line. You can talk to me all you want about how we followed the board and we would have taken a receiver if it was the best player available at the time that our pick was up. Well, I mean, maybe make a move at one point and just, even if it's on day 3 at some point, and say, there's a receiver with a skill set that we think can help before round 7. And maybe it is this guy that they took in round 7, but that's a stretch to me. And so, I'll reiterate it. The urgency was there along the defensive line. It certainly was not there at wide receiver throughout the draft process.
It's going to come down to 2024. And that year, that spring, that weekend, they were mentally in a place of drafting a wide receiver, and you had a cluster there,
Yeah.
and you traded down to because you didn't, you kind of viewed that cluster, I guess, as all the same. And you didn't like Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy, by the way, thought the Bills were going to draft him. We talked at the Super Bowl. He was convinced after his visit that he was going to be a Bill. Now, there could be more there, but pretty blunt with
Hmm.
that look back. I think the regret, look, I don't think it's time to write off Keon Coleman as a bust. This was a make or break offseason for him. The GM challenged him, the head coach challenged him. We could talk an hour about Keon Coleman right now. It is all about him and Kincaid. But what was the opportunity to trade there? You move up, I think it was what, 5, 6 picks. Brian Thomas, he looked like a star
Yeah.
on a bad team last year.
And how many different mock drafts had the Bills doing exactly that? Moving
And
up
you
for
had the
Brian
extra
Thomas.
second, right, from the
Yeah.
Diggs trade. You could,
Right.
I don't know what it would have cost to move up 10
Yeah.
picks to make that happen. But the
Yeah.
Falcons just gave up a future first for James Pierce. Take a look at that rap sheet if you want, or what the
Yeah.
scouts said about him. Who knows? Who knows what they thought about Brian Thomas? And I get it, hindsight's 2020, and no GM likes to hear a couple media guys saying, "Oh, you could have done this." You could, but that was a realistic thing in the moment. You're right.
Absolutely. And then, I know that we're gonna talk about the Eagles a lot here, right? We talked about their defensive line and how they made life miserable and terrorized Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But look on the other side of the ball, right? The Eagles also have two dynamic superstars at wide receiver, right? They traded for AJ Brown. They have Devonta Smith that they drafted in the first round. So they're investing in the position too, right? Now, and they have Saquon Barkley, right? Who obviously, had a massive year. And I like James Cook a lot as a weapon, but to sit there and say, well, oh, you can win without receivers, and maybe you point to the Chiefs who win the Super Bowl after trading Tyreek Hill. So it can be done, but it's not like investing in receiver is some crazy idea that no good teams are doing. I mean, the Eagles just won the Super Bowl and they have invested heavily in wide receiver, right? And so I know competing schools of thought doesn't necessarily have to mean one is wrong, one is right. Brandon Beane, as you said, maybe is proven right at the end of the day. If this team gets back into the postseason as we all expect, and the defense actually gets it done this time, then Brandon Beane can rightfully sit back and say, "Hey, I utilized my resources, I spent them the right way." And I'm not even saying that anything he did in the first 2 days of the draft was wrong. I think it's totally defensible, but and again, listen, the season doesn't start until September. He makes that point all the time. It's a fair one, right? We have seen players added to this roster uh, after the draft in recent years who have had success. And so it can be done, whether that's trade, whether that's, maybe a guy gets released here, by a team that took a wide receiver who could come in and help them. There are still options for Brandon Beane, but to be as dismissive and combative about the idea, I just think is out of place. I don't think it's right. I think it's fair to have a differing opinion on the state of the offense and, to your point, the willingness or desire to continue to give Josh Allen weapons to succeed.
So over the same span, the Chiefs have drafted four wide receivers. Uh, so I guess four times Buffalo. McCole Hardman, 56th overall in 2019. Sky Moore, who hasn't worked out, obviously, 54th overall in 2022. But it didn't stop him. The very next year, Rashee Rice, baggage, yes, 55th overall. He's a legit number one when he's healthy. Sure looked like it last year before his freak ACL when Mahomes crashes into him against the Chargers, and then Xavier Worthy. So you're talking 3 straight years, three premium picks, first and second round picks. I mean, you got to nail those to win Super Bowls. And the
Yeah.
margin for error, to your point earlier, is so thin. We got to touch on some of these players. So I agree with you. Hairston, look, I give McDermott and Bean some credit there because different cornerback than they've been drafting before. It kind of steps outside of their comfort zone. They've had this type, big physical tackler. It's a different game though, man. Like this isn't the early 2000s with Jim Johnson, Sean. Like this isn't those Eagle teams. Like you need corners who can cover those crossing routes that Kansas City just kills Buffalo on year in and year out. Harrison could be that guy, being fastest player in the draft. Scouts just love his change of direction, his speed. He'll fight. You got to concede defeat on a jump ball here and there, but that's where your defensive coach has to find a way to scheme him into ideal matchups that don't put him in those situations too. So if you're going to go corner, and hell, it was a game of where is Kyer in the AFC Championship game. You better find a corner, and it better be a
Yeah.
different kind of corner than what you've been drafting. So I like the pick in the first
I
round.
do. Yeah, I do too. I got no problem with it. I mean, fastest player in the draft. I feel like we talk about speed a lot for this team and the need to add it. It doesn't always have to be just on offense, even though I think we talk about, it probably tends to drift that way when we talk about it. But yeah, Hairston, you mentioned Worthy, right? Worthy killed him in the AFC Championship game. He was really good. You want a guy that can run with him. There aren't many of them on the planet that play football. Hairston's one of them, right? He can run with him, and so. And I think the tackling thing, I think it's a point that, yeah, the Bills value it, but I think it got to be a little bit overblown, right? They don't want a guy that he doesn't have to come in and be some finished product and be this ultra productive, amazing tackler at cornerback right away. I mean, he's got to be willing to do it. And I think the Bills saw that in Hairston. And then you get him in and you hope, Jamal Adai, the cornerback's coach, can, develop that skill to get to a passing level. They're not drafting Maxwell Hairston to make a lot of tackles for them. If they are,
Right.
that's a problem because it means they're either completing a lot of passes at him or they're running the ball at him or whatever. You're drafting him to cover and to make big plays, right? And so he's got some of that home run ability. You look at the career, I think he tied the Kentucky program record for pick sixes. A lot of production in 20 career starts. I think it was 6 interceptions, something like that. So, that's what he's here for. And then, the second round, the move up for TJ Sanders, I will admit, at first I didn't love the idea because I just didn't see, I thought the bigger need was the space eater, the guy that helps the run defense, right? But the more that I've read about Sanders, and I do agree with the Bills that the interior pass rush is where you win games, right? Like that is, and that's an area that they lacked, right? They've got Ed Oliver, but if to your point, if Ed Oliver gets the double team and it's a third down passing situation and TJ Sanders is out there with Ed Oliver and he can win a one-on-one matchup and get that interior pressure, then I can kind of get behind that idea. So I'm sort of warming up to
Yeah.
that pick a little bit more than maybe what.
Same.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
yeah,
point.
yeah. And so that makes sense. And then yeah, Landon Jackson. I think Landon Jackson to me is going to have a very AJ Epinesa-esque career, which is to say that he's going to be a good player. Do I anticipate him being a Pro Bowler? Probably not. Those dynamic edge rushers usually go in the first round. They don't usually last until 72nd overall. But hey, they need rotational defensive ends. Like they need guys, particularly 6 games at the beginning of the season with Hoyt out. You're gonna want somebody that can take some snaps away from Joey Bosa to keep him fresh because that's the guy you want in January to be the difference maker, right? To get that key third down sack against the Chiefs. So I got no problem with the picks. I think they're totally, they make sense, right? Every one of those picks in the first 2 days makes a lot of sense, and I can see the reasoning for it.
Yeah, I had the same thought with Landon Jackson. This sounds like AJ Epinesa reading Bob McGinn's stuff from the scouts. So just pull that up. Here's what some scouts around the league said about Landon Jackson. 6'6", 266, ran the 4.68. Did have the best vertical at his position at the combine. Tough guy, brings energy, not that athletic for an edge, a little bit upright and rigid. At the point of attack, he's too high, doesn't have that leverage, but he fights. If you can get his long arms on you, he has a chance. That's one. Not a bad bender, good strength, uses his hands. He'll check off every box as a human being, and the measurables, he's sort of stiff, but with his numbers, he might go first round. Well, you're getting a tightly wound defensive end who plays hard and can cover some ground. So, yeah, that is an AJ Epinesa like edge. If you're the Bills in the third round, right? You take that. I got some beef though. TJ Sanders, that son of a gun, man. He took all the pepperoni pizza that was left in that box in the media auditorium after his presser. Did you catch that, Jay? Did you get your pizza before TJ's presser or after?
No, I did. Listen. I'm a seasoned veteran of the media room food situation. Listen, I know to get in line when it comes out. All right, you don't want to be dilly dallying around.
Yeah.
Right, get yours. Right, and so when that pizza came out, I was in line. I got what I wanted. I got what I needed, and yeah, I know. I, I
Yeah. I
I
went
know
over
what
there
happened
afterwards. I'm like,
after.
there's only cheese
Yeah,
left. It's just a box
uh,
of cheese pizza. He took it
it's
all
a
for him and
box.
his mom. It's a cute moment. It goes viral. NFL picks it up, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
What the? I think he had like 5 or 6 slices there.
It was a mountain. It was a mountain of pizza. Yeah. It's a big man, right? It's a big man.
Well, that's
So
honestly, you know what? We if the Bills win a Super Bowl and TJ Sanders is the force that creates that turnover late in the fourth quarter, I think all of Western New York and beyond should probably thank us, right, for allowing him to eat all of that pepperoni pizza because he's got to put on some weight. They do probably want him to put on a few more pounds for the NFL. A little undersized, athletic, but
yeah,
need a little more girth, a little
yeah,
more girth. So we'll
yeah.
sacrifice our pepperoni in that room.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, unfortunately. I know it didn't go over real well at times in that
Well,
room. But
I'm not. I'm not going to be like our old friend. I do miss those Sully tweets on game day back in the day, talking about the toaster and the food situation to that press box.
that's a legendary one there,
Oh,
isn't
that
it?
was great because the food was amazing. There
Yeah.
was wing nuts, which is
Yes.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of warmed up on TJ
You, by
Sanders
the
too.
way,
Yeah,
Mulberry, second night, by the way, just so you know.
I did miss that second night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't want to rub it in, but yeah, that's a
I
big.
get it.
It's okay. But
Yeah, I had
yes,
to.
yeah. Anyway, I digress. Back to TJ Sanders. Yeah. Yeah, I understand the reasoning, the philosophy, and the more that I've thought about that pick, the more, because I kind of looked at it as like, okay, well, you've already got Ed Oliver, but I get the third down point. Like if he can come in and work with Ed Oliver on those passing downs, maybe that's effective. And then, you're spelling Ed Oliver on first and second down, so Sanders is going to play there at times. So I think there's a path to some pretty meaningful playing time for him early. And if he can, like again, that interior pass rush, Ty, you look at, the Super Bowl, right? Milton Williams just got a $100 million contract based largely on what he did in the Super
Yeah,
Bowl. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Those Patriots are coming too. I don't know if it's going to be 2025. It might be.
yeah,
I'd say 2026. Their position. I mean, that roster through free agency. Look, they had how much? Almost $1 billion to spend. It seemed,
yeah,
but the draft as well. You
yeah.
get the best lineman in Will Campbell. You come back and get Travion Henderson, I believe, the running back.
Yep.
Every pick, every signing just oozes Mike Vrabel. Like it is going to be a rock fight against the
Yeah.
Patriots. It is not going to be. Watch, play this clip after the Bills win 40-3, probably. But I feel like it's not going to be cruise control like it was at the end of Belichick. He's too busy courting women that are a third of his age. What a weirdo that guy is. Got to work him in every podcast at this point because it's just bizarre. That CBS interview, holy shit, man, that
That's
was
some weird
insane.
stuff. Weird stuff.
Weird,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
She's on the
yeah,
side, like we're not going to talk about that.
yeah. Very, very, very strange.
What,
Yeah,
what's like Gronk and Edelman, all these guys thinking like they took orders from Belichick like their whole careers, and
yeah.
he's just running this tight ship, and now here he is like some 24-year-old is on the side telling him what he can and cannot talk about, just bossing him around, wearing the pants.
Running the UNC football spring practices. Yeah, out on the field. Yeah, just the whole thing is bizarre.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
it is.
50 years apart in age. Like, good Lord. Yeah, strange, strange.
It's very strange. It's been a weird week for old NFL guys and young women, right? Shannon Sharp with the 20-year-old OnlyFans model. That took a few twists and turns, to put it mildly. Like,
That's a good way
I
of
don't
putting
know
it.
what's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
bad about just like getting married and having kids and being normal. I
Being normal,
call me
right?
old
Yeah.
fashioned, Jay. Call me old fashioned.
Yeah, you are a bit of an old soul. That's true.
Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
was talking to Gina about it, and like she's like, was Bill married before? I'm like, I had to think back, like, yeah, and he had kids, but then like then he was dating at somebody after that who was way younger. Anyways,
Yeah.
I better watch myself going down these roads of private life. I don't even know what the hell we were talking about. But yeah, TJ Sanders.
Exactly.
He could be a force for the Bills. We'll see. We've got takes, we've got opinions. I think they probably should have drafted a wideout at some point when you got Josh Allen, 29 years old, MVP in his prime, cost control deal, all that. It's I hate today because it's just draft grade day. And you can't
Yeah.
apply grades to picks. Everybody wants it, but it's really the disgusting second cousin of the mock draft. It's worthless. It really is.
It was just gonna. I was putting it right there, up next to the mock draft, which I know your feelings on. It's the same. It's the same thing, right? It's the content machine, just churning out whatever. That's what it is.
Which is great when
Yeah,
Jacksonville trades up. No, like nobody saw that coming. Like nobody. You've got a
yeah,
first-time GM, first-time head coach. They're both in their 30s. They keep this under wraps, and it
yeah.
just immediately lights all the mocks on fire. So I love that every year. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yep.
This darn mic keeps popping it out. I think that's a sign, Jay. Unless you have, stuff to get off your chest, I think that will do it for this episode.
I have one thing that I have to say. As we've been talking, my colleague, Mark Gone, you know really well, I knew this was coming, but has announced his retirement. And I know. Um, he has put it out on X, so it's public now. It's enough that we can talk about it. And I will get emotional if I talk too much about it, but I just want to say that Mark is my mentor in this business, the guy that I have looked up to more than anyone else. Grew up reading Mark. You know him well. There we could have an hour-long podcast about Mark and stories, and it probably wouldn't be enough time. But I want to just give Mark a shout out and just say what an absolute legend he is, because that's the right word. 43 and a half years at the Buffalo News.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, I'm gonna stop now so I don't get emotional because that would be embarrassing. But it would be, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge it and just say that Mark is the man.
Oh,
Is the easiest way of putting it. And you will not find a more consummate professional, a guy that just did the job the way that it should be done. And so it was an honor and a pleasure to work with him, and I want to pay him his due in some little way here, and just wanted to recognize that for a minute. So
wow.
yeah,
Thank you for
yeah,
sharing, Jay. I had no
yeah,
clue. And I will echo everything that you just said. Mark On is, first of all, he's a great guy.
yeah.
And he's one of those reporters when we're all kind of in that auditorium or we're all on the road. He was my coworker in my Buffalo News days as well, obviously. You just want to be around him. You just want to
Mhm.
bullshit with him. You want to hear one of his old stories from back in the 90s. He's
Yeah.
got a sneaky sense of humor. We both know that.
So funny.
So underrated.
Yes.
And he did the job the right way. You
Yeah.
need more Mark Gons covering professional football. Old school, and he could just take something, and it was this way back when he's on the beat with Alan Wilson, right, covering the Bills and some really bad Bills teams. He could take something that could be complicated or could get caught up in different verbiage and lingo, and all that shit kind of gets thrown around, and everybody kind of assumes that you know what they're talking about and everything. He could just put it in layman's terms, simplify it, make it digestible. He had such a skill when it came to that. And my last thing on Mark On. So we both started young at the Buffalo News. I think, did you intern there as well through college?
No, no, I never did intern, but I did start. Yeah, I started part time, and then
Yeah.
yeah, pretty quickly, went full time. But yeah, no, I didn't intern there.
So we both were like, very low on that totem pole
Yeah.
in different ways. Interns, working the desk. Me and Jay, we worked some late nights there, just dying to get on a beat at one point. And suffice to say, there were some people on beats, some people ahead of us on that totem pole who were a little territorial and would let you know what they thought if you tried a little too hard. Maybe you put up an extra blog post when you're not supposed to, and maybe it quote unquote violates some union pact, whatever. Anyways, we were both hungry and we were just both dying to cover the NFL back in those intern slash editing part-time days. And Mark was somebody who was not territorial, who wanted to help, who would talk to you about the job. If you're on site with him somewhere at a training camp practice, I mean, he was comfortable in his own skin and wanted to see you grow, help you grow. And I just think it's a great attribute for anybody to have in any industry.
So yeah, like I said, I won't. We won't take up too much time because we could talk about this for so long. But to give you an idea of the type of guy that Mark is, Saturday was the last um, kind of big thing that he was covering for us, and he didn't. I asked him on Thursday or Friday, I can't remember what day, but said, are you intending to sort of keep this quiet, and just sort of go out? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, because the draft is where, there's a large gathering of us there for 3 days, right? Us being the media that covers it for multiple different outlets. And where I was going with this was on Saturday as we were wrapping up. I may have been talking to you. We were over by the cooler there, right? And I think I'm talking to you, and Mark was walking out. And I got back to my computer and there was a card sitting on my computer, and it was from Mark, and I won't share everything that he wrote in there because a lot of it was personal, but it was a card that was a lot of what you just said, talking about being a younger reporter and growth and where he's seen my career go. And I am, getting a little choked up, but it was the most meaningful, kind gesture that I have ever experienced from a coworker. And it shows the type of guy that he is. He is the one that should be celebrated right now, not me. You don't need to be getting me a card. You're the one that deserves the card and the accolades and the all of the flowers, right? For lack of a better term, that term that we hear now. Mark, that's the kind of guy Mark is, right? He is the one that is on the way out and pumping me up, and I just that card is something that I shared with my parents because I wanted them to read it because of how much it meant to me. And so, to say that I will, cherish that and keep that for the rest of my career is an understatement. And I hope that everyone in their, walk of life, whatever it is that they decide to do, has a coworker that, like Mark, that pumps them up, that helps them, that wants to see them succeed and get better and root for them. Because that's what Mark was to me, is to me. Just so darn proud to call him a friend, to know that he has been able to, work this magnificent career. President of the Pro Football Writers Association, Hall of Fame selector. Bills fans, if you want to know why Andre Reed is in the Hall of Fame, thank Mark Gaughan, right? Because Mark Gaughan passionately made that case year after year and did so eloquently to the point where eventually he won that room over. And Andre Reed, listen to Andre Reed's Hall of Fame acceptance speech where he thanks Mark Gaughan, right, for the presentation that he met. I will never forget going to dinner that night. The Super Bowl was in New York City that year, the first cold weather Super Bowl. We went to dinner, Mark and I, after, and I said, you just got Andre Reed into the Hall of Fame, and he wanted nothing to do with it. He wanted no credit. That's the type of guy he is. Mark doesn't want the credit, but he deserves it. He's going to get it, at least in this podcast form, and I'm sure, and I'm looking on Twitter and seeing the mountain of congratulations that are flowing in, and deservedly so for the career that he had. But that's who Mark was. That's who Mark is. And again, I just can't say enough good things about the guy. So,
Man, what a phenomenal tribute. That was awesome, Jay. I mean, and you're right, just an abundance of humility in not just an industry that doesn't necessarily have a lot, like in society. I mean, really any industry. I think everybody could live a little bit more like Mark Gaughan. So I hope he enjoys this retirement and soaks up life day in and day out and doesn't have to, wrestle over pizza with TJ Sanders and
I know he's not going to miss, and I will share a little bit of what I said. I joked with him because we get these monthly training emails, and we have to do cybersecurity training. And I texted him a couple of weeks ago, and I said, Mark, how much are you going to miss having to do your monthly cybersecurity training? And he said, almost as much as I'll miss writing 800 words about what stood out at this week's OTA. And it just made me laugh because I know that, he's had his fill of writing about 800 words on OTAs. And now he doesn't have to do that. He gets to enjoy, as you said, a long, healthy, happy, prosperous retirement. And I'm thrilled for him in that regard. So
a perfect, hopeful note to go out on. Jay, thanks for sharing. I had no clue. And thanks so much for dissecting this Bills draft, which has a lot of folks talking. We'll have to bring it back on. I always rope you in, talk you into this.
Anytime, buddy. You know that.
Thanks, Jay.
Yep.